It's shaking versus stirring cocktails in this video. This is all about the differences when you should do one, when you should do the other, and a fun little experiment with a martini to kind of show you just how much of a difference it makes, whether you shake or whether you stir. Now, a lot of people who are just getting into bartending or who are interested in making their own cocktails might not understand what difference it makes, whether you shake something, whether you stir something, and they might just stir everything, or they might just kind of toss things back and forth to mix them up however they see fit. But there is a difference that we're going to talk about today, and it's also good to know when you should be shaking and when you should be stirring drinks. So here I have a couple different things you might come across when you're mixing drinks. This is just a glass that is meant for stirring cocktails. Has the pour spout. You get the spoon right in there. Works great. Holds about 17 and a half ounces this one holds. So it's great for making multiple drinks. We use that a lot with stirring. You don't necessarily need a special tool for stirring. This is what's called a cheater tin and a shaker tin. You might see other times where this part's made of glass. Basically, they go fit into each other just like that, and you shake it back and forth. Now, the main difference between shaking and stirring is the amount of dilution you're adding to a drink. Shaking a drink is going to add much more dilution. The act of slamming the ice against the walls of the shaker tin are going to help break it up a little more and cool the drink a little bit more, because you're going to be adding extra ice to that. Extra water, essentially, is going to be added to the drink. So a shaken drink is going to be colder than a stirred drink. The best times to stir a drink is if it's an alcohol-forward type cocktail, something that is predominantly a base liquor with something like a vermouth or bitters, something like a Manhattan, a Martini. Those types of drinks are well-known stirred cocktails. You stir a cocktail when you don't want to chill it down quite as much. You don't want to have as much dilution. And if it's an alcohol-forward drink. When you shake a cocktail, you're adding more dilution to that. You're cooling the drink more, and you're also incorporating the ingredients a little bit better. You're going to shake cocktails that have a good rule of thumb is something that has lemon juice, lime juice, any other kind of fruit juice, dairy products, really thick syrups of any kind is typically going to be shaken. These ingredients are a little harder to incorporate, so it requires that extra little bit of effort to incorporate them well. Also, when you shake a drink, you're going to be diluting it more, cooling the temperature down further than if you were to stir it, and you're also going to be adding air. The process of pushing it back and forth adds air to it. That's why if you see something like a whiskey sour, you might notice there is a little foam head on the top. That comes from the egg white getting air essentially whipped into it during the shaking process. So those are some pretty handy guides for when you're going to want to shake, when you're going to want to stir. I did, however, earlier go through with an experiment that I conducted using a martini. Now, a martini is a gin-based cocktail. The recipe I used is a half gin, half dry vermouth. My dry vermouth is not crystal clear like a lot of the ones you see, so I felt it would be good for this experiment to use it, as you'd be able to see in the glass a little bit more. So I'm going to talk while I show you some clips from that experiment, show you what's going on and what to look for. Okay, so I sped this up a little bit just so you'll see, well, so it won't take so long. First thing I'm doing here is adding 50 milliliters of a dry gin to each. And I don't normally pour things back in the bottle, but since it was a clean flask, I felt that it would be okay this time around. The next one, obviously, I'm doing the same thing for the shaker tin. 50 milliliters, just verifying that. And here's the dry vermouth. Like I said, it is a little bit of a different color. Primarily, the reason for that is this particular one here. I enjoy it. It's a French one, and it's going to help us identify the different colors as I measure it into the beakers. So hopefully you'll see that at the end. Also had to go ahead and put 2 dashes of orange bitters in there as well. The dasher on that is usually pretty solid, so it shouldn't make much of a difference in terms of the volume in the drink. Now from here, I added ice, roughly the same amount of ice to each, and decided to stir and shake the respective cocktails. I stirred for about 30 seconds, shook the drink for about 15 to 20 seconds. That's pretty standard when you're mixing cocktails. So you might think stirring the drink longer would make a difference. If you look on the left where the stirred cocktail is being poured, you'll notice it's a little bit less. And in the freeze shot, the still image, you can see that yes, it is probably about a 10 to 15 milliliter difference. Also, when pouring, on the left is the stirred cocktail, on the right is the cocktail that was shaken. There's a very obvious clarity difference between the two. And that is the difference between shaking and stirring cocktails. So hopefully that little demonstration helps you understand a little bit about what the difference between the two are. The one that was shaken is going to be a little bit colder than the one that's not. Also more diluted, as you could tell, because even though the volume of the ingredients was still the same, the volume of the finished product was different. It would be a little bit more watered down, a little colder, maybe some more subtle flavors would get covered up by the extra water and the cooler temperature, which is sometimes why drinks are stirred and not shaken. But that's all for me today. That is shaking versus stirring. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something today and was able to see the difference between the two. Until next time, I want to thank you for watching this, and remember that if this idiot can do it, so can you. I don't have a drink to cheers.